It was a quiet afternoon when Sarah, a young woman, sat in the warmth of her modest home, watching her husband David play with their two small children. Their life was simple but full of love. David worked hard every day to provide for his family, while Sarah stayed at home tending to the children. They had dreams, small ones, but dreams nonetheless. They were content with their life, and Sarah often thought that this was all she needed to be happy. A family who loved each other, a home that was safe, and food on the table. She never imagined that anything could shatter this fragile peace. Then, one evening, everything changed. Sarah received a phone call that she would never forget. Her hands shook as the voice on the other end told her that David had been involved in a terrible road accident. She didn't understand at first. The words were too harsh to grasp. "What do you mean? He's gone?" she whispered, her world crumbling around her. The line went silent for a moment, and then the voice confirmed her worst fear. David was dead. The news hit Sarah like a wave. She felt as though her heart had stopped. The children didn't understand. They were too young to know what death was. Sarah couldn't even explain it to them. How could she tell them that their father was never coming home? She collapsed on the couch, the weight of the loss pulling her into a deep sadness. The house that had once been filled with joy now felt empty. Her dreams, her future, seemed to vanish in an instant. That night, as she sat in the dark, holding her children close, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the future. She had no idea how she would survive without David. The financial strain alone was overwhelming. How would she pay the bills? How would she provide for the children? The thought of facing life alone, without David, felt unbearable. She could barely hold back her tears as she whispered to herself, "How am I going to do this?" Days passed, and the pain of her loss didn't fade. Each day felt heavier than the last. She tried to go on as best as she could for her children, but it was hard. The world seemed to move on, but Sarah felt stuck. Each time she passed by their favorite park or saw a father with his children, the emptiness grew. David had been everything to her, and now he was gone. The idea of raising two small children alone with no support and no means of survival seemed impossible. She knew she had to be strong, but at that moment she didn't know how. The world was cold, and Sarah was alone in it. The days after David's death blurred together. Sarah did her best to keep the children fed, but it was getting harder. The little savings they had were quickly disappearing, and the bills piled up. The rent was due, the gas was running out, and the children needed new clothes. Sarah tried to find work, but every door seemed to close in her face. No one wanted to hire a woman who had two small children to care for. She walked from one interview to the next, her heart heavy with each rejection. With every "sorry, we're not hiring," she felt like she was sinking deeper into a pit she couldn't escape. One afternoon, when the children were playing in the corner of their tiny living room, Sarah stood by the window staring outside. She saw the world moving forward. Families laughing, people going about their busy lives, and she felt like she was frozen in time. How did she get here? Just a few months ago, life had been different. They had been a family with dreams for the future. Now her dreams seemed shattered, and the weight of responsibility felt like it was crushing her. The loneliness was another burden. Sarah had always had a supportive network of friends and family, but in the wake of David's death, she felt abandoned. The few people who had promised to help had disappeared. Her neighbors, who had once greeted her with smiles, now looked away when she passed. They were uncomfortable with her grief, and they didn't know how to help. As the days dragged on, Sarah began to question everything. Was there really no one who cared? One evening, after yet another day of searching for work and coming up empty, Sarah sat at the kitchen table staring at the pile of bills in front of her. The children were asleep, and for the first time in days there was a quiet stillness in the house. The weight of it all seemed unbearable. She thought about how much she loved them, how much she wanted to give them a better life, but how could she? What could she do when everything felt so impossible? The next morning, the situation worsened. There was no food left in the house, and Sarah knew that it would be days before she could buy more. The children's cries for food broke her heart, but she had nothing to give them. She went to bed that night with an empty stomach and a heavier heart. How long could she go on like this? How long before everything crumbled completely? The days felt like they were stretching on forever, but Sarah refused to give up. She couldn't afford to. Every morning she got up, cleaned the house as best as she could, and did what little she could to take care of her children. It wasn't much, but it was all she could do. One evening, as she wiped down the dusty shelves, her eyes fell on an old jar that had been sitting on the counter for years. It was a small savings jar that David had started before his death. It was meant to be used for something special, but Sarah had forgotten about it in the midst of everything. She picked it up, rattled it, and realized there was still a bit of money left inside. It wasn't much, but it felt like a lifeline. Her hands trembled as she counted the coins and crumpled bills. It wasn't nearly enough to cover all the bills, but it was something. She held on to the money for a moment, staring at it in disbelief. Could this small amount be the start of something new? Sarah wasn't sure, but she knew she had to try. For her children, for David's memory. The next day she went to the market with the small amount of money she had. She bought a few clothes, cheap but decent enough to start a small business. It was a risk, but Sarah had no choice. She didn't have any other options left. When she returned home, she set up her phone, and after some hesitation, posted pictures of the clothes online, hoping someone would take an interest. It felt like a leap of faith, and as she clicked post, a mix of hope and doubt flooded her heart. Would anyone care? Would this work? That night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about how far she had come and how much she still had to do. She thought about David and how he had always believed in her. He had always said that no matter what happened, she could do anything she set her mind to. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe things could change. The next morning, she checked her phone, and to her surprise, there was a message. Someone had commented on her post. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Sarah felt her heart lift. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. With renewed determination, she spent the rest of the day posting more items, checking her phone, hoping for more messages. It was small, but the first step had been taken. The following days were filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Sarah spent hours every day searching for more clothes to sell. She found some at the market, and sometimes even dug through her own closet for items she could repurpose. Slowly, small orders began to trickle in. It wasn't much, just a few pieces of clothing here and there, but it was enough to give her a sense of accomplishment. For the first time in months, she felt like she was doing something right. It wasn't easy, but Sarah was starting to believe in the possibility of change. One afternoon, as she sat on the floor surrounded by stacks of clothes, Sarah thought about the future. Her children were starting to smile again, their faces brighter with each small sale she made. But it still wasn't enough to feel secure. The bills were piling up, and though she was grateful for the small successes, she knew that something had to change if she was going to give her children a better life. There had to be more to this than just posting clothes online. Sarah began browsing on her phone for tips on how to grow her business. She stumbled upon an article about online selling strategies, something she had never thought to explore before. It was simple advice, but it clicked in her mind. She had been doing it all wrong. She needed to reach more people, to expand beyond the small circle she had built. She needed to invest in better marketing, to find ways to make her listings stand out. The possibilities were endless, and Sarah realized that this could be her way out. This small online business could actually turn into something real. With this new knowledge, she set out to improve her posts. She learned how to take better photos, write more engaging descriptions, and even how to use social media to her advantage. It was a lot of work, but Sarah didn't mind. The children were still small, and she knew that the more she worked now, the better things would be for them in the future. As she worked tirelessly day and night, she began to notice something incredible. Her orders were increasing. Slowly but surely, her business was growing. One day, after a particularly busy week, Sarah sat down to check her phone and saw that there was a message from someone she didn't recognize. It was an order for a large amount of clothing, far more than she had ever sold before. She stared at the screen for a moment, unable to believe her eyes. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that could change everything. Her heart raced with excitement and nervousness. Could she really handle such a big order? She didn't have all the inventory in stock, but the money from the previous sales had given her enough to buy more. She knew this could be her breakthrough. With a deep breath, Sarah accepted the order. This was it, the beginning of something bigger. The days following the large order were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah worked tirelessly packing the clothes, coordinating with delivery services, and ensuring everything was perfect for her customer. It felt surreal. She had never imagined that something so simple could turn into something so big. But the more she worked, the more she saw how much potential there was in this business. She could feel her confidence growing with each successful order, each positive review left by customers. Her children were beginning to understand that their mother was working hard to provide for them. They were still too young to grasp the full weight of what Sarah had been going through, but they could sense the change. There was food on the table every day, and the tension that had once filled the house seemed to be fading. Even the little things, like playing in the yard and going to the park, became easier. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better. It was as if a shadow had been lifted from their home. As the weeks went by, Sarah's business began to grow exponentially. The orders came in faster and more frequently. She couldn't keep up with the demand on her own, so she started hiring a few friends to help her with the packing and shipping. This was the moment she had dreamed of. The feeling of success was overwhelming. She had done it. She had pulled herself out of the darkness and into the light, not just for herself but for her children. One evening, as she sat down to check the sales figures, Sarah realized something that brought tears to her eyes. She had reached a milestone she never thought possible. Her small online business had grown into a full-fledged operation. The money she was making now was more than enough to cover all the bills, to provide for her children, and to even start saving for the future. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. For the first time since David's death, Sarah felt a sense of peace. She had done this. She had built something from nothing. She had taken the pain, the grief, and the desperation, and turned it into something beautiful. Her children were growing up in a home that was full of love and hope, a home that no longer felt like a place of sorrow. Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she thought about the future. This was just the beginning. The next day, Sarah received another message, but this one was different. It wasn't a customer order. It was a note from a local charity. They had heard about her success and wanted to feature her business in a community event. Sarah was overwhelmed with emotion. She had started this journey alone, struggling to keep her family afloat, and now she was being recognized for her hard work. It was a moment of validation, a reminder that no matter how hard life gets, there is always a way out. As the months went by, Sarah's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Her business continued to thrive, and with each passing day, the burden of financial stress began to lift. The house, once dark and full of tension, was now filled with laughter and warmth. Sarah watched her children grow, their faces full of joy and hope. They no longer had to go to bed hungry or wear clothes that were too small. Life had become smoother, more manageable. But beyond the financial stability, it was the sense of accomplishment and strength that Sarah cherished most. Her small online store had turned into a small brand. She had even started to hire a few full-time employees to help with the growing orders. It was amazing to think that just a few months ago she had been struggling to survive, unsure of how she would feed her children. Now, she was a business owner, providing jobs and helping others in need. Sarah could hardly believe it. She had built something beautiful from the ashes of her grief. But even as her life improved, Sarah couldn't help but think about David. She still missed him terribly, and there were moments when the grief hit her unexpectedly. There were quiet moments in the middle of a busy day, when she would pause and think of the life they had once shared. David had always believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. He had always known she was capable of greatness. His absence still left a hole in her heart, but Sarah was learning to live with it. One evening, as she sat with her children at the kitchen table, Sarah realized how far she had come. They had a beautiful meal in front of them, and for the first time there were no worries about how they would pay the bills or where their next meal would come from. Sarah looked at her children, who were happily eating and chatting, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had done this. She had given them the life they deserved. Just then, Sarah received another order, a large one. But this time, It wasn't just about the money. It was a reminder of how far she had come. She had gone from struggling to survive to running a thriving business. The orders were no longer just a way to get by. They were a symbol of her strength and perseverance. Her journey had not been easy. It had been filled with loss, pain, and uncertainty. But through it all, Sarah had found a way to rise above it. And now she was living a life she never thought possible. Her children were happy. She was happy, and most importantly, she had found her strength again. As she sat back in her chair, a smile spread across her face. It was a smile of relief, of triumph, and of love for the life she had created. Despite everything she had been through, she had made it. And this was just the beginning of her new life. Just when Sarah thought her life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, something unexpected happened. It wasn't a major setback, but it was enough to stir up old fears and doubts. A competitor appeared. At first, it seemed like a harmless situation, a new seller offering similar products at lower prices. But as the days passed, Sarah began to notice a troubling trend. The new seller's business was growing rapidly, and they were receiving more attention than Sarah's store. The orders began to slow down, and her sales dropped. It wasn't a drastic change at first, but it was enough for Sarah to notice. She found herself checking her phone more often, staring at the numbers, trying to figure out what was happening. Was it just a phase? Was it the market shifting? Or was it her competitor pulling ahead? The worry crept in slowly at first. Late at night, when Sarah lay in bed, she thought about the future. What if this was the beginning of the end? What if she couldn't keep up? She had worked so hard, fought so much to get to where she was. Was it all going to fall apart now? But Sarah wasn't the type to give up easily. She had faced loss and hardship before and had found a way to rise above it. This challenge, though tough, wasn't something she would let defeat her. She spent days researching her competitor, looking for ways to improve her own business. She came up with new ideas to engage her audience, better promotions, more personalized customer service, and creative ways to showcase her products. It was time to be more innovative, more strategic. If she wanted to keep growing, she needed to adapt. The next few weeks were a blur of hard work and determination. Sarah worked late into the night, refining her business model and reaching out to her loyal customers, asking for feedback and support. She decided to host a special event, an online sale to celebrate her store's success and thank her customers for sticking with her. She threw in special offers and discounts, making sure her customers knew how much they meant to her. And then, something amazing happened. The sale took off. Orders came flooding in. Her loyal customers came through, sharing their love for Sarah's store on social media and helping to spread the word. New customers started to take notice, and Sarah's business began to grow again faster than ever before. In the end, Sarah realized that the competition hadn't been the real challenge. The real challenge had been her own fear. The fear that she wasn't enough, that she couldn't keep up. But she had proven to herself that she was more than capable. She had weathered the storm, and now her business was stronger than ever. The months that followed were filled with steady growth and an ever-growing sense of pride. Sarah's business, once just a desperate attempt to survive, had become a thriving, sustainable success. She was no longer just getting by. She was flourishing. With every new order, with every positive review, Sarah's confidence soared. She had done it. She had built a business from the ground up, all on her own. Her children were thriving too, no longer burdened by the shadows of uncertainty that once loomed over them. They were happy, healthy, and full of hope for the future. But Sarah's journey wasn't just about financial success. It was about proving to herself that she could overcome anything. She had faced unimaginable grief, been pushed to her limits, and yet she had never given up. Through every struggle, every sleepless night, she had held on to one thing: the belief that things could get better, and they had. One evening, as she sat on the porch with her children watching the sunset, Sarah felt a sense of peace that she had never experienced before. The struggles, the sacrifices, and the tears had all led to this moment. They had built a life that was rich in love, hope, and security. David's memory was still with her, but it no longer brought her pain. She could smile, knowing that she had honored him by living a life that was full of purpose and joy. As she looked at her children, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her life had changed in ways she never thought possible, and now she was able to give her children everything she had always dreamed of. The house was warm, the bills were paid, and there was always enough food on the table. She had done it, and her children would grow up knowing the value of hard work, resilience, and love. But there was one more thing that Sarah hadn't expected, a moment of validation that would change everything. A few weeks later, she was invited to a National Business Awards ceremony, where her story was featured as an example of success and perseverance. She couldn't believe it. How had she gone from struggling to survive to being recognized as a role model for other entrepreneurs? The moment she received the award, standing on stage with her children by her side, Sarah realized just how far she had come. Her life had been transformed not by luck but by her strength, her perseverance, and her unwavering determination. She had faced the impossible and had come out the other side stronger, more capable, and more confident than ever before. As she held the award in her hand, Sarah smiled and thought of David. He had always believed in her, and now she believed in herself.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.